Hello and welcome back to episode 7, a little bit more pose-to-pose action. Last week was an introduction to animating with a mix of pose-to-pose and straight-ahead workflows. However, at the end of the tutorial I felt that I had kind of glossed over some of the principles because there's only so many poses that Squishy can make, and I think the whole pose-to-pose concept would sink in better if there were some more poses. So this week we're going to animate a fairly complex action using the Simple Guy character. You're going to see how all of the Squishy principles are still applicable and how a fairly complex motion can be broken down into smaller, more digestible chunks. Again, we start with broad strokes and refine. As we move forward in the training, it's getting harder to separate some of the remaining principles. They all start creeping in and overlapping each other. For example, we haven't had a specific class on slow in and slow out, but we have been using that ever since day one on all our projects. By the end of today's class, we're going to touch briefly on staging, arcs, exaggeration, and timing. So this week I'm going to work through our shot the way I always do, and next week we're going to explore a different way of blocking using the breakdown tool that was added in 801. The breakdown tool uses a more traditional approach to animation. The workflow is based on classical 2D principles that are covered in great detail in the Animator's Survival Kit and the Illusion of Life. Animator's Survival Kit is now available on iPad, which is pretty awesome. I haven't picked it up yet. And Illusion of Life might be hard to track down, but if you can get it, it's a must. It's an amazing book. Both of them are amazing. Okay, so enough with the intro. Let's get down to destruction. This week we're going to animate Simple Guy. Just going to wind up and he's going to blast this giant concrete box that's sliding at him. It's not going to be a ton of poses because you're going to realize real quickly the amount of time it takes to pose a human character versus posing Squishy. Squishy pose you can do in a few seconds, but it's not inconceivable to spend, 5 to 10 minutes getting a pose exactly the way you want on a character like this. I might have to speed up some of this to make it not last 5 hours. But yeah, let's blow up some stuff. So this week's class comes with an exploding box. It's been shattered and animated. So if we scrub our timeline here, you can see it just explodes. There's not enough time to do a whole dynamics intro. It's just a baked out animation. All of these have keys on them. All of them are grouped and they're just put in this folder and they are underneath here. So we'll be able to scale this, move it, rotate it. So what's going to happen is we're going to animate the box sliding forward, and then it's going to explode when Simple Guy shoots it with the laser. Boom. And to offset our timing and stuff, we'll be able to do that later on. But just to let you know, you won't have to worry about any dynamic stuff, and I have tested it in 601, and you will get an error when it imports, but it plays perfectly. And then you guys can go in and change the materials and stuff later on if you feel like it. Moving on. Okay, so next thing to do is load up our character. We're going to want to go to System, Open Content Folder, Samples, Rigging, and Simple Guy ACS Rig, and you can just drag him in, and there he is. So that approach will probably work for 701 and 801 users. I'm sure we'll get another version posted for anyone who wants to follow along in 601. You will get an error when you load him, the standard things might not work error, but he works fine. So that's good to know. 601 you can follow along. You won't be able to do some stuff later on, like next week, but this week you should be fine. Anyway, and for people who've never used a human rig, there's a lot to him. He's simple, but his rig's not. My advice to anyone starting out with a new rig, and I do this all the time at work, is to just play with it. Don't try setting keys on it. Just go around, click this. What does that do? Oh, twists the knee. Cool. Okay, what does this do? Go around and see what kind of things he does. Go around, touch all the controls, and get a feel for the rig. Don't just start trying to key stuff, because halfway through the animation you'd be like, oh, I didn't know there was a control that did this. I mean, it's happened to me a bunch of times. So now if I start a new show or I get a new character, I always take 15-20 minutes to just mess around with the rig. It'll save you a lot of time down the road. I've played with this rig a lot over the past year, so I'm pretty familiar with it. But right off the bat, some of the main things I like to do, if you click this, is a hip control size. I usually scale this up to make it a little easier to grab. And if there's one in the middle of the chest here, a little circle. And torso control size. I usually scale those up a little bit. The default controllers will be fine, but this rig's really deep. Lucas did an amazing job on it, and it has a ton of functionality. But for us, we're just going to use it in this simple mode here. Yeah, so go give him a test drive, and we'll get started in a minute. Okay, so let's start posing this guy out. We know we have an action sequence, and all of his poses should help sell that fact. Right now, this pose, this does not say action. So you might be like, well, I just gotta select his arm. I'll just rotate this down, and then just rotate this one down, and there we go. He's not in that pose anymore, and now he's good to go. But this pose is horrible. This pose doesn't say anything. It says he's gonna get his lunch money taken. Got to get him down, got to get him ready to fight. This pose should read all by itself and kind of sell what this scene is about. So, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was to start animating with the hips, and all the motion radiates outwards from there. And I think if you start working that way, you'll find it's a lot easier to kind of keep track of what's going on. When I started doing this, I'd grab an ankle, grab a toe, grab a neck, grab an elbow, and just mash the character into some kind of pose. Not necessarily keying in, just kind of moving stuff around. So we're going to start with our hips. We'll establish where our center is. And then everything else will kind of fall into place. So we know there's a giant concrete block down here that's sliding towards him. So what would you be doing? I'm definitely anticipating something bad happening, getting ready, so probably have a better center of balance. If you grab these little things here, hit W. These pull vector controls will control where your knees aim. His butt's sticking out a little there. I don't know if I'd want to fight in that pose. You want to try and avoid a thing it's called twinning, where your pose is symmetrical, where you end up doing the same thing on both sides. See, right now that's pretty bad in the twinning department. So you can pull this down and pull the shoulder down. Select this. Again, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of winging it right now for a pose. Once in a while, you'll run into these big jacks. They just seem to kind of grow willy-nilly. I haven't kind of figured out why they do that, but sometimes if you just hit the plus or minus key, you can just grow them and shrink them as you need it. So I'm going to rotate this out. And if you click on this little ring here, this will bring up your finger controls. So I'm just going to put them together a little bit, and then just if you left click and drag, you'll see you can adjust the values. So index, middle, pinky. Oh, sorry, he's only got 3 fingers, so that's the ring. So that's good. See how much better this hand looks than this one? This hand looks like a ping pong paddle. So you can see how much more time consuming it is to pose something like this than pose squishy. This character doesn't even have a face. You can see how lengthy this process could become. Okay, so let's check our center of gravity. Does he look balanced? Does he look like he could stand like that without... Not really liking how this ankle's kind of twisting or kind of flat, so I'm going to twist this out like that. Just looks a little bit more in line with his knee. Okay, that's a cool pose. I like that. So we're going to go down to our actor. We're also going to make a new action. I'll show you why in a second, but you can think of actions as a container for the timeline, and poses would be a container for one frame. All the values that make up one pose you could store in there. An action will store all your curves values for the whole timeline. So you could have an action that's a jump on one timeline, then you could save out another one as a run, as a slide. So we're going to click on action, say create new action for the actor. Let's call it, I don't know, smash. I'll hit OK. So you can see it's been added, simple guy, and smash. So with that, I'm going to key our actor. So go to the graph, we'll see, there he is, he's been keyed at frame 0. Now if we go back to none, it disappears. There's values still because the actor's selected, but it knows that there are no keys on this layer, the none layer. If we go back to smash, there's our keys. So we've blocked in our first pose. Let's move on to our second. So I just noticed that all my channels are missing from here. I'm not sure how it happened, but if it happens to you, just click on the gear here and show channels list. So there you go. Now you remember what Squishy looks like, his actor. Now take a look at what Simple Guy's. Look at all these channels. This is all the stuff we're keying on frame 1. Now imagine just losing 3 or 4 of these channels and having to go and hunt them down. Like, oh, it would be horrible. Okay, so pose 2. I'm going to move ahead 10 frames, say. Throw down another key here. You can see everything's been posed, just like we did with Squishy Box. So close up the graph. I'm not going to be using it as much in the blocking phase of this one. Okay, so I guess our next pose, starting at our hips, we're going to have to do a wind up. So we're probably going to have to... Now I wasn't quite sure how to act this one out, what your weight does, so I actually stood up and tried this a couple times just to see where things go. And without going crazy and doing like a big jump into another pose, it looked like I just kind of, my weight just kind of transitioned to my back foot. And I kind of just, the rotate was kind of slow back into this position. So go into local here, this up, fix that knee's looking a little busted. Don't have to worry about too much about the fingers now. We'll do another pass of those probably later, but just so that they're changing between poses, just doing something. Okay, now this is our shooting hand. This is where all the action's going to be focused. So start pulling this one up. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So we'll key that again. And now you can see we're transitioning from one pose to the next. So now we're going to need to really crank this up. So I'll go forward another 10, key it again. And now this will be kind of like our anticipation. Let's go back. Almost like a baseball pitcher now. Put this back. Yeah, I found when I was doing this that I was the elbow in front kept coming up. Guess that's for balance. You want to try to avoid this, like where the knee locks in this pose like this. So pull it so it's almost popped straight, just a little. It's always bad when the legs pop in CG if you pull the model too hard. So he's getting ready to crank this out. He's got his head tipping into this one, giving him the death stare as the block approaches. Now this, we know the next pose is his hand fired wide open, so this needs to be a fist. So we're going to close this in. Pull that in a bit. And again, broad strokes. This is just blocking. So key this. Now you can see back. And now I'm into this pose. So we've only got 2 poses here, but you can kind of see what's happening. It's starting to work out. So some animators like to work with a thing called stepped keys. Stepped keys have no interpolation between the keys. There's no blending. It's not linear and it's not curved. It's literally just pops from pose to pose. And the good thing about setting up actions is that it's a one-click solution to change all the curves on your actor. So if you click on action now, you can see the interpolation is set to curve. So that gives us this, right? If we switch this to linear and look at our graph, you'll see what's happened. We got linear keys going 1, 2, very roboto. Now if we click this to stepped, you'll see what happens. The curves literally step. So you'll see it's flat, pop, pop. And a lot of animators like working this way. I guess basically lets you see your poses in their purest form. You know, if the animation is working in step mode, you know it's going to work when you start smoothing out keys. So I used to do this a lot in the beginning. I don't really do it as much anymore. But for this, we'll continue doing our blocking in stepped, and you can try it out for yourself and see how you like it. So we've got this pose, 1, 2, and now we need our next one. I'll just drag that whole pose over, and I'll go to frame 30. I'll key that. If we go up into our graph, you can see we've added another pose here, and you can see how nice and neat everything is. 4 poses, everything keyed. So close that up. Let's do our last pose here. So it's going to be a big one. So we're going to have to transfer all his weight from the front to the back, or from the back to the front over this leg. A little handle there again, and he's going to twist. And might be able to slide this one forward a bit so we can really give her with this one. Because we're going to have to go in and add some in-betweens and some breakdowns. These are just the big kind of key poses. These are the poses we need to tell our story. And we know his arm's going to be fully extended here. Whoop. Same with the fingers, so we can open those up now. Click this. Okay, so keep twisting this body here. The weight will be kind of over this leading leg. Let down a bit. Again, you want to avoid the popped back leg. Bend this forward even more. And then when you whip around like this, like you had your elbow back here, now it whips around. Now it continues to go around. So grab the shoulder here. Tip his head a little bit, give his arm a little bit more room. I'll rotate that around. So how's our line of action here? That pose is looking pretty good. I think he's going to be blasting a little lower. And I think I want it a bit more forceful, so we'll push it even lower. that. You see that has way more power in it than if he's kind of like this. This is like kaboom, like he's really driving into it. Really exaggerate the pose. Okay, so now we'll key that. So we've got our 4 poses. If we scrub through them, we should be, even just with these 4 poses, we should get an idea of what's happening. Boom. Okay, so I'm just going to turn off, I'm going to hit the O key, turn off the locators, and I'm just going to do a GL preview of this and see how we're looking so far. Okay, well I like this pose here. This one's alright. This one, I think, this anticipation, I think could be way huger. I think we should really push that one, and I'm happy with this one. This one looks good. It's got a good driving force to it. Okay. So another thing you want to be mindful of is the actual pose. Does the pose read? And a really good way for doing that is with silhouettes. So if you pop open the item list here, pop open Simple Guy, right at the top there's a thing called Bind Meshes folder. Pop that open and you'll see his meshes in there. So in the Display tab, there's a thing here called Show as Silhouette. So if you click that, it'll just temporarily make his body all black. Takes out all the detail. You know, it's kind of tough for us because we don't know where our camera is right now. We're just kind of animating it. So what's going to happen is once we figure out our camera position at the end, a lot of these poses will probably have to be tweaked to look the best through that camera angle. So right now, this pose is kind of weak. This silhouette is very weak. I don't know what he's doing. Is he holding his stomach from a gunshot wound? Is he... I don't know what he's doing. This pose, it's also kind of weak. Can't really tell what's happening. Or his silhouette here. I mean, if it was from here, I guess it wouldn't be as bad. See that's not good. You don't know what's happened. Was his arm cut off and he's got a shoulder pad? Like, what's going on? This doesn't read very well at all. You should be able to get a pretty decent idea of what's happening. See this pose here? This reads nice and clean. From there, you can kind of see what's happening. This is all nice and clean. Now this pose like this, not so good. Does he have arms? Is this a stump? Is this a wing? Now obviously this isn't going to work in every situation, but if your animation is readable in a black silhouette with no sound effects, no facial animation, no music, you know it's going to work once all that extra stuff is added. So just for a joke, let's see how this looks in preview. So we can kind of get it, but I think if his hand was up here and you saw the silhouette of his arm, that'd be better. But again, we're just blocking out. Just be mindful that poses are important and silhouette is important. Moving on. Okay, so select your mesh here, turn off our silhouette. We'll do another pass of that later, and we'll just close this. Hit the O key, bring back our controls. So, I'm just going to select all the poses, slide them forward a bit. So now he's going to stand here and do nothing for a little bit. Don't want the action to start right at this beginning. This one's okay. I actually think I'm going to tip him forward a little bit more. And that kind of will help sell an anticipation into this next pose just by bending him forward a bit. And then pop into this one. So this one I'm going to push some more. Okay, so let's do a preview of that. Okay, so I like that better with that pullback. I think that reads a little better. I think it helps sell the force of it. I think his pullback's probably a bit slow. And because we've been good and we've keyed everything properly, so pop open your graph, we can start sliding entire poses around very easily. We got hundreds of curves here that we're dealing with. That's all nice and neat and organized. So I think we've stayed in linear long enough for now. Like, you could block out tons of stuff like this, but I'm going to switch back to curved to kind of get an idea of what's happening here. So I'll close this and just do another preview. So just with the 4 poses, I think it's working because it's very floaty. There's no impact in this last one at all. It's just kind of like, ah. So let's go in and crush that last pose. So I'll take this. I like this hold. There's a lot of buildup in this, and we could fix between these 2 poses here. But this, I think, should happen twice as fast. So we'll just pull that whole pose over, do another preview. There we go. Boom! Okay, so I'd say the blocking looks pretty good. Let's go in and start breaking this down. We'll start adding some overlapping action and offsetting some timing. And yeah, start layering some goodness on top of it. Okay, so we still got our nice clean curves here, but I'm going to start busting this up and offsetting stuff and turning this into a whole mess in a second. But before I did that, I want to show you another workflow enhancement that you guys might want to start dabbling with. I haven't been using it because I think it would be confusing if you can't see where my cursor is going on the timeline. So what I'm going to show you is the time tool. If you click this little thing here, you'll get this little widget. And it's a really nice tool. So basically, I've been coming down here to scrub. And this is like muscle memory. I've been doing this for so long. It's just what I do. I just go to the timeline every time. But with the time tool, your workspace becomes scrubbable. So if I middle click and just hold, it will start playing the animation. Now you can see it's kind of ping-ponging right now. If I right click and drag in the workspace, you can see my timeline is updating there at the bottom. And you can see why I haven't used it yet. I think you guys would be a bit confused if my animation just starts playing randomly. I think it's easier if you can follow the cursor. But if you right click and go back and forth, you get the same functionality that you do when you go down to the timeline, except you don't have to. You could be in here working and right click and drag. So I'm just going back and forth right now. And wherever I leave off, if I middle click and just hold, you can see it starts replaying the animation. It's just ping-ponging it. So you're scrubbing without moving the cursor at all. So if you click off this will make the scrub just go one way. It'll just keep repeating it. And that's just holding middle click. Again, I can right click and I start scrubbing through the animation. Now these buttons up here, these will help you cycle through poses. So if I middle click, you see I'm at frame 20 right now. If I middle click, nothing will happen because I don't have a pose to go back to. If I middle click over here, it will pop to frame 25 and I let go, it'll snap back. If I right click, it will go and hold that pose and I can go through them. If I right click over here, it will go backwards through the poses. So right click forward, right click backwards. If I middle click, it just pops. Now these buttons are kind of tough to hit. So if you wanted to, this is also another nice feature here. If you click this, you can click on a thing called viewport regions. So you could set it to sides or top corners. So we'll just do sides for now because they're bigger and hit OK. So now if I go over here, you'll get this highlighted area. And the same functionality that's in these buttons is now in this big huge square, which is a lot easier target to hit when you want to work fast. So I could be here scrubbing my timeline. Okay, that's looking good. Right click back and forth, click over here, and cycle through my keys. But I don't have a key over here, and I'm at the end of my time, so I need to go back. So if I middle click, I could test that pose, or right click, and go back through them. Right click, forward, right click in the workspace, and scrub through it. You can also put these in the top corner if you want. Okay, so now they're up here, a little bit more out of the way. So I can right click on them at the end. So right click to go back. You can see it's going 25, 25, 35, 40, and back. And then if I just want to test them one at a time, just middle click and it'll pop. And again, right clicking in the viewport. Look at the viewport, and if I middle click, it'll play the loop. Also, if you click back on the gear, say I turn off my viewport controls, I animate everything with a tablet, so I don't have access to mouse wheel for stepping through keys, but I can see how that would be useful if you use a mouse. You might want to try that out. And for the ping-ponging and just playing, you can adjust your frame range here. So let's say it's a 24, because right now it's just doing 12, so if I hit OK, now if I middle click, you'll see it'll play a lot bigger region. And if I ping pong it, get to the end, it'll go back. So anyway, I just want you guys to know they're here. I'm not going to work with them while you guys are watching, but I encourage you to dabble. I just think it's a bit confusing if I just start going like this in the workspace. Okay, so let's start busting this thing up. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how I can tweak this thing quickly, show you guys a nice workflow, but not make it last 2 hours. I'll try and do it in 20 minutes. So I think I'm just going to pound through this super quick and just babble a lot, because I think that's really the only way to kind of show you what I want to show you. So right now we got nothing going on here at the beginning. So I'm going to take this pose. I'm going to middle click, drag, and key our actor. So now we've got this. So I think I'm going to do what's called a moving hold. So I'm just going to pull up his hips just a little bit. Just add a little. It's going to be so subtle, but it's just so he's not standing there like a statue. Okay, so all that stuff's been keyed. So now if we scrub, you'll see it's just a tiny little, basically recycled that whole pose and just did a little bit of a tweak. Now he's going to pop in. Now our problem here is that everything is hitting at the exact same frame and nothing moves like that. So I'm going to get out of our actor, I think, and I'm just going to start tackling this piece by piece and doing our offsets. So right now we are going to need the graph. Here's a little lower. Okay, so right off the bat, this foot's just sliding across the ground. Feet sometimes do that, but not very often. Usually you lift it off. So in the middle here, this middle pose here, I'm going to make this, I think I'm going to make his foot leave a little bit earlier and get there a little bit earlier, so it's not showing up the same time as the hip. That's too early. Just maybe 2 frames earlier. And I'm going to bend his foot a little. So now he's gonna, so it's not moving at the exact same rate as the hip. And also it'd be nice to put a little bit of anticipation in his hip. He's just kind of, everything's just kind of going back together at once. So I'm going to take this hip here. In the middle here, I'm going to just pull him forward a little bit. And tip the body just a bit. Pull that frame back. We're getting some funky business in here, so we'll clean these out. Again, right click, drag. It's a big pop in our Z there. I'm going to turn on our filter here. We're getting a bit too much stuff here, so we've got curves on, and I'll turn off items. So we just have curves and these showing, and I need my position Z, and you can see there's a big backwards pop in that, so I'm going to clean that just a little bit. Okay, so then going back to our chain example, the hips are going forward a bit, so I'm going to have this part lag behind a little bit more. Switch this to local here. Bend this over. Same with his head here. Do the same with the chain, just do some offsets here. You can see right now we've got a big, slow kind of rotate X on the head. Put that up a little bit. Again, just totally winging this. Just trying to bust up some of the timing so everything's not exact. So when the head pops here, it's going to hitting the same pose here. So pull this forward a bit. And I'm going to tip his head down. Whoa, hey now. Just on X. As he starts to pull back, so you'll see it'll even push that a little bit more probably. And then tweak that. Okay, so now he's going to pull the head down and then put it back up. There you go. So I'm having a big problem with this blue foot here. I keep watching this. I've been watching this the whole time. We got a lot of sliding here. Your feet don't slide, you plant them. Well, you can't have both. You can have a sliding foot, but you can't have both feet sliding. There's no power if you're sliding. So we could maybe lift it off the ground during this part. Or we could maybe pull the hips not back as far. But I do like this pose where he ends up. So if we select this, see what's doing. So nothing's happening here on Z. He's just getting yanked back, and then he transforms on Z. So maybe when he takes the step back here, we can throw in a key. Go back into this. We can raise it. Oh, do almost like a baseball kind of pitch. It might look horrible, and we might have to redo it. Like this is going to have to go down way quicker. So if we select these, if he is going to raise this thing, it's already got to be down here for him to transfer his weight onto it. So put this forward, pull this forward. He's just going to have to hold it up here a little bit longer. So I'm going to middle click this and hit S. I'm also going to pull in my timeline here because I feel like I'm trying to burn ants with a magnifying glass. It doesn't have to be that hard to select stuff. I can zoom in here and see what's going on. I think I'll make an extra pose here, push that down, and it's going to really snap to the ground. We'll tweak that more later. Another thing I'm really noticing here is this pose right through here. If you look at it from the back, your hand wouldn't go around like this. Actually, I got a great way to show you what I'm talking about. If I select this, go to motion paths, I'm going to add a motion path. You'll see what we're talking about here. You can check out the arc. Now, if you're going to blast someone, you're not going to put your arm out in this big circle. Your hand is going to go right from here, straight up past your face. So what we need to put an in-between pose right in here somewhere, right in the middle. Still don't want it going out that far. So we literally might have to do this motion frame by frame. See, now it's driving straight through. And this part over here, he's still going a little bit wide. So I'm going to have to curl that around. There we go. Okay, he also stops pretty dead here. So we can grab these hips here. We like the rest of this pose, but there's no reason he can't just kind of hit this and kind of maybe just a tiny bit of motion, just a little bit of a moving hold here, maybe something with the head, the arm back, just so he doesn't come to a dead stop. So now it's boom. This is actually a bad thing in CG. You see it a lot in kids shows, I think just because there's no time. But if you, where your curves, if you select this, the curves, they kind of just go over and they just go back into a pose. That's the interpolation is doing this overshoot and settling back. You want to try and avoid that look. So what you can do is just try and go, like right now, this is a position in Z that's causing this big back and forth here. You can see how he hits, he goes forward, and then he comes back. Now we don't want that. We want him to hit. So if you middle click and drag this down, you see he'll still be moving forward. He'll hit his pose and then he'll kind of settle into it. Whoop, hey now, get rid of that. He'll hit his pose and then kind of settle there. So now he doesn't get that, you don't get that seesaw vibe and you're not getting that pop in the back of the leg. And this one, you can see his back foot here is pivoting as he plants this one. But you can't have 2 feet. Like this one really can't move until this one has planted. Once this is planted, this one can start pivoting. So we'll grab this ankle control here. And you can see that the pivot there on the Y. So hold. Now we can slide these poses over and that'll put it back. We might have to grab his knee too because it goes with it. So now, boom. Now we could twist it. Ooh, that's looking pretty busted. So I'll have to pull that around. There we go. So I'm going to go in and put a little extra on these elbows here. Another thing too, everything's twisting at the same rate. And this, I don't like this from here. He's going like this kind of weird. The body would start to go. Remember how we were talking about motion coming from the hips and then out? So this one's already starting to come back. So I think I'm going to twist this up and pull this back a little bit. Just give this a second to catch up, to just lag behind a little bit. So that's working. I'll just put just a little bit of stuff on them, just a little bit of motion to kind of keep them alive. Okay, so we could probably do something with this arm here too. Keep this arm, just let it lag behind just a little bit just to get it to punch. I think I'm just going to check the arcs of this hip. So go into motion path, add a motion path. Let's take a look at what's happening here. So we can see right here, this is a pretty linear kind of thing. It'd be nice to have like kind of a curve this down a bit. I think that might help with the driving. It's a bit more organic motion. Plus even when he hits over here, you could see this pretty kind of flat. It's like he goes perfectly straight back on Z. So I'm going to edit motion path, we get our little handles here. See, it's helping to shape the curve. And then this one that goes down here, I think could probably use a little bit of a bend in it. Pull that handle in. So I think that motion is better. It's more, there we go. So I turn off this path, edit that, remove motion path. Okay, so I'm going to close this up now. I'll turn off the locators. And let's just do a preview. See, like we could tweak this for like another day. But you see, just by breaking it up, see now the foot leads a little bit before. When he leans forward, now the head tips as he starts to reel back. He lifts the foot off the ground, then he transfers the weight, plants the foot like a pitcher, and transfers the weight over his front foot, leans forward, and delivers the death blow. Cool, so I'm pretty happy with that. Let's bring in our box and line up some destruction. Okay, so let's go get our Shatterbox. You should have been able to download it from the share site. And let's just go do an import. So File, Import, Shatterbox. Give it a second. There's 300 pieces in it, so it takes a second to load. Okay, so let's just move this back a bit. Let's hit the W. We'll just scrub and see what's happening. Okay, so it's hitting from the wrong side. So let's just rotate it 180 degrees. So at least it's exploding from the right side now. And you can see that our timing's way off. It looks like you should explode around. If you look at our guy here, depending on how you've done the scene, my guy he kind of hits the laser pose around frame 40. So I think the laser should be, I think the explosion should probably be around 44. Yeah, so I'm going to turn off Simple Guy. I'm going to go to just flat shaded, just because I had some problems shifting the keys here. It'll do it, but I don't give it any extra hassle. 300 pieces, it's a lot of keys to manage. So, I'll pop open this and click the first mesh, scroll all the way down to the bottom mesh. So there you can see there's all our keys. So I'm going to pop open the graph. You can see them all loaded up there. And we need them to start at frame 44. Okay, so be patient. Just click on the first one. After you've selected all the curves in the graph, just click on the first one and just drag them back. It's going to take a while for it to update. Just let it do its thing. Just hold over the frame you need to go to and it'll make it there. Okay, and then let go. Give it a second to think. And we're good to go. And head back to advanced. And we'll turn back Simple Guy back on. So now, boom. We got our timing working. So we can push him back a little bit. Figure out where he's going to explode. I'm thinking, I don't know, there's good. So hold the W or hit W, you can key that. So we've keyed our positions. Boom. Yeah, it works good because the particles, they are the pieces, they have a bit of forward momentum anyway, so no need to slide them. That looks pretty good. Okay, so let's go add in our laser. And when you guys see how I did this, you're going to cry because you probably thought it was something really cool, and it's so not. So deselect everything, hit the N key. Let's grab a cylinder and just draw one out here. It doesn't need any divisions, 12 sides is fine. And then we're going to do our edit, center to bounding box, bottom. And we're going to scale this down. And then we're going to rotate it 90 degrees. And then we'll zero it out. So all our values are zeroed. Slide this over here. Okay, now go back to animate. I should actually turn off the box for a second. Close our graph so we can get in here. Okay, so this is our pose where he hits right there. So let's put our laser up here. Let's scale this down. Frame that up. You're going to want to sink it into the hand. Okay, so now I'm going to select the hand joint here. With this selected, one, shift and hit P. So now this thing is going with the hand. We've just parented it. So now if we select our laser, we can scale it. I'll switch this to local, and you see we'll be able to scale this thing on Y. So we could turn our block back on just so we can get our aim. Scale this in Y, say 300. Say 1000. Say 2000. Alright. Okay, so there's our laser, and we're going to want to rotate it a little bit. Direct hit. There's our laser. So there's our explosion. Okay, so let's key the scale on Y. S. Let's go back a couple frames. 41. And we'll scale this to 0. And hit S. So now we're going to come wind up. Boom. So scale Y. S. Middle click drag. S. So now it's going to, and then it's going to retract back into his hand. And you could play with the timing of that. I don't think it needs to be. It can come out quicker. And then just probably go away really quick. So yeah, I'm sorry if you thought this was going to be like a super cool particle laser demo. It's just a scaling cylinder. Okay, so I've turned off my locators, closed the graph, close this up. I've changed our preview GL to full screen. So let's see what we get. That's pretty funny. Awesome. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the class. I know it's a lot to take in, but baby steps. If you have any major problems or issues, feel free to contact me. and try and help out when I can. All right, talk to you next week.